Hey YouTube, Tyrant60 here to do another movie review. This time my spoiler review of Spider-Man Far From Home. It is beyond my expectations, actually. So here's how I'll go about it. I'll first talk about what I like. Next, I talk about what I didn't like. Third, how it ties into the MCU. Um, and to uh, spare you the spoilers early on. I won't spoil anything until I get to the tail end of it, which is where I'll talk about how it ties into the MCU. So first, what I liked, it's fantastic. As I mentioned, it exceeded my expectations. What's great about it is it really gets Peter Parker, like what all the other Spider-Man, what all the other Spider-Men, Andrew Garfield and not Tom Holland, and Tobey Maguire, they didn't really get Peter Parker. Andrew Garfield especially, and Tobey Maguire. If he got Peter Parker, it's Peter Parker, the adult Peter Parker, not the Peter Parker we all identify as the Peter Parker in high school, Peter Parker. Uh, Tom Holland is really good at establishing or conveying the awkwardness of being in high school and having feelings for someone and not knowing how to convey those feelings, and um, the priorities of someone who's in high school. This isn't a spoiler if you've seen Endgame, but another thing this movie does really good is explain how the world is adjusting post snap, or as they call it, blip. And really early on in the movie, they have a scene which kind of tidies that all up really nice and quick. Um, and the sequences, I'll just call them the Mysterio sequences, especially if you know Mysterio and his abilities, you know what I'm talking about. Those sequences are incredible, and those sequences alone are worth the ticket price. Other things I like, motivation. I really feel like what we saw in Homecoming is continuing in this movie in terms of our understanding and how relatable Peter Parker is in terms of understanding his motivation as a hero, and how compelling that continues to be in this movie. So let's get into. Yeah, that's about all I like. Well, additionally, before I talk about things I don't like, um, his relationship with the other characters are very strong. Um, MJ and Ned, his friend especially, work really nicely, and that carries the movie pretty well. So let's get into what I don't like. Uh, what I don't like is uh, sorry, distracted by a soccer game. What I don't like is it's a slow start, a very slow start. Probably one of the slowest starts to any MCU movie. Um, it the very beginning of the movie until the second act, even it's a very long first act. Feels very slow. And since we've already established who Spider-Man is and his abilities, and I've skipped through all of the um, coming of age stuff, as well as, well, not all the coming, more importantly, just his backstory, because we've seen it multiple times before, and in this movie there wasn't really much of that. And with Mysterio, they left him mysterious by not having much of his backstory until after we see his powers and who he is and everything. That means the opening act in this movie, Act One, is like, it feels like it's like an hour long, but once you get through it, things move really briskly, and it's a worthy investment, but it feels like a long one. A lot of people were complaining about how slow Endgame was. This to me felt slower than Endgame. In Endgame, I gave it that because it's a necessary bridge to cross. Where Spider-Man Far From Home, I felt like there was a lot of unnecessary baggage in the story that wasn't being cut through. Um, other things I didn't like. There's a couple scenes in the movie which feel very play-like in the sense that the whole world just stops for this one scene to happen with a couple of characters, and there's no one on the streets, and it's almost as if Sony's saving money in this movie by not hiring extras for certain scenes. And that really pulled and detracted from the quality of the film. Um, and in terms of the plot, the motivation for Mysterio is strong, but the delivery of everything is a little hokey. And in my opinion, even hokier. Is that a real word? Hokier? Even hokier than what we saw the Vulture do in Spider-Man Homecoming. And to me, what Sony is not doing as well as the MCU has been doing in general is conveying um, a convincing villain. And as earned as the motivations are for Mysterio, um, the delivery is too hokey. I even for a comic book movie, I found myself struggling to suspend my disbelief. So here we go right into the spoiler stuff. If you've seen the movie, awesome. Now I can talk freely. So if you haven't seen the movie, tune out, find something else to watch. Thanks for watching. Spot me a like and subscribe. Uh, but if you haven't left yet, watch the movie. It's a worthy watch. It's a good time. But on to spoilers. So Mysterio, as expected by everyone, Mysterio is actually a villain who is playing Nick Fury to gain Spider-Man's favor, to gain some piece of technology from him. Very well executed. Again, as I mentioned, how it's presented is a little hokey, but the motivation is cool. Even cooler is the inside information that this team of people would have because they're disgruntled people who work for Stark Industries. And it's really cool that the seed was planted back in Civil War. Just like Spider-Man was planted back in Civil War, the barf technology was planted back in Civil War. And I wonder if Sony and the MCU collaborated way back in 2014 when they were working on Civil War in 2015. Like, oh, here's this new technology. Here's this new character we're introducing in this movie to bring into the forefront. And here we're not going to expose this little bit in the first one, but in the second one, we're going to expose that little bit. And what's her name? Amy Pascal had slipped up a little bit and explained she wanted to introduce more and more characters into the Spider-Man universe, and Kevin Feige was like, "Whoa, let's not talk about that yet." Makes me really curious to see how far this goes. Tom Holland and Tom Hardy play next to each other in Venom and Spider-Man finally having an appropriate interaction on screen together. That's not Topher Gracie. um, I really wonder if Flash Thompson's ever going to be Spider-Man. Perhaps in a few years when he's gained a few pounds. The big one I think a lot of people are thinking about. First, let's talk about the mid-credit scene. Is J. Jonah Jameson going to once again appear? Hang tight. I'm just going to plug in my phone because it's giving me the low battery, and I'm going to put my hand in front of you there just to block the camera. So is J. Jonah Jameson returning to reprise his role? J.K. Simmons, I mean, see, they're so identical. I hope so. And it was just a cameo appearance of someone who was like vlogging, like Alex Jones status. But I hope he's back for the next Spider-Mans. But they did expose that Peter Parker is Spider-Man to the world. So how is he going to deal with that? Is he going to have to go underground? Is there going to be a mind wipe like there was post Civil War via Professor X? Here's the biggest one. Obviously, the post full credit scene, which was very long and perhaps even the longest of any post credit scene in the MCU, which is actually that Nick Fury has been a Skrull. And not just any Skrull, but the Skrull from Captain Marvel's Skrull. Um, and not only that, but Nick Fury is in space on a Skrull spaceship. And I hear that, and I'm thinking, why? Why and for how long has Nick Fury been like that? What does this open up? Why has this been happening? Is this actually that the Skrulls have done this to Nick Fury, or is Nick Fury doing this by his own power? And this is something I had predicted and was hoping for out of Captain Marvel, but is now coming to fruition in Spider-Man Far From Home. And what I'm actually hoping is Nick Fury is caught on to a secret invasion. Maybe there's a contingency of Skrulls who are trying to take over the world and take over the world's leaders and maybe even the Marvel superheroes. And the ones working with Nick Fury are actually in the contingency of Skrulls who are trying to prevent that from actually happening. So, wow, what an incredible opportunity to open up a whole new set of Marvel movies that may actually have a very interesting story, and it may actually make Captain Marvel be worth it, not just for the Deus Ex Machina character in Avengers Endgame, and actually have a reason to exist, which is the Secret Invasion. So what I'm actually hoping for is the Secret Invasion is a thing that will be happening in the near future of the MCU, because that is way more interesting than some of the characters that are being presented on screen, or presumably, like the Bruce Lee character in the MCU. As much as I love martial arts cinema, I just don't see a place for it as of right now. And way more interesting than the Inhumans. As interesting as they are on the page, the television series was absolutely abysmal, and for good reason. I don't think it will ever translate. But I do think A Secret Invasion will translate, and I do hope the Kree do return by the likes of Accusers, and maybe by the likes of their alliance with Thanos. Anyways, that's it for me. If you haven't yet, and if you decided to watch a spoiler review before watching the movie, I encourage you to support the official release, to quote Team 4-Star for you Dragon Ball fans out there, and go and watch Spider-Man Far From Home. And I'll catch you guys on the next one.